Good evening, I'm Jim Whaley. Tonight it's a great pleasure to welcome to Cinema Showcase one of our finest actresses, Miss Shelley Winters. Among her great films, A Double Life, A Place in the Sun, Night of the Hunter, Lolita, Alfie, The Poseidon Adventure, and The Diary of Anne Frank and A Patch of Blue, both of which won her the Academy Award. She's told part of her fascinating story in a book appropriately called Shelley. Join me tonight as I talk with Shelley Winters on Cinema Showcase. Thank you very much for joining Cinema Showcase tonight. And right now, join me in welcoming to the program Shelley Winters. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for asking me, Jim.
And let me get the correct title of the book is Shelley, also known as Shirley.
Yes.
Now, why the distinction?
Well, because when I was a beginning actress, my name was Shirley Schrift, and Schrift means to write in German. And I was convinced that that was not an appropriate name for an actress. And I was in an office, and a secretary, I was going in to see about doing a role in a play, said, "What's your mother's maiden name?" And I said, "Winter." And she said, "Well, isn't there something that sounds like Shirley? Do you like Shirley?" I said, "Oh, no, there's millions of girls all over Brooklyn named after Shirley Temple." And she said, "Well, what if somebody called you?" And I said, "Well, Shelley's my favorite poet." And she wrote down Shelley in front of me. She said, "That's good." And she sent the name in. I said, "But that's a man's last name." She said, "Not anymore, it isn't." And then years later, when I was at Universal, for some reason they added an S to Winters and made me plural.
Reminds me of the scene in A Star is Born where Judy Garland suddenly finds her name, Esther Blodgett, changed to Vicki Lester for no apparent reason whatsoever.
Well, they do two things when you go to a studio. They change your name and the color of your hair, whatever it is. It could be platinum blonde, natural, or red gold, whatever it is. They change the color of your hair and your name. It's sort of, and once you're established, they can't. But the kids nowadays don't allow it. If their name is, Dustin Hoffman, who would nobody would be a Dustin Hoffman. It would be Rock something, or but nowadays kids don't let Meryl Streep. What a horrible name for a movie star, but it works.
That's right.
And a Rose by any other name,
Let me tell you how much I enjoyed reading your book.
Thank
My
you
only
very
complaint
much.
is that it ends where it does. It ends in about 1955. So
Yes.
we have another fantastic period ahead of us. I assume there will be a second.
Yes, I am. I'll tell you why I ended it there. I never really thought I would be a movie star or successful in films. I thought, and I aimed my life to work in the theater. And it was rather accidental that I went to California. And my dream was to star on Broadway in a play. And finally, after I'd served 7 years at Universal, I was offered the lead in A Hatful of Rain, which I did on Broadway, and it was successful. And there I saw my name up in lights. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't quite come that way. I mean, Shelley is trying to reclaim Shirley through the whole book. Yeah. And I sort of do at the end of the book. But I had written so much up till then that we had to stop somewhere. I mean, I would have had 3 volumes. As I'm going along now, I'm thinking of all the funny things and strange things that have happened since 1956. That gives me another 25 years, doesn't it?
Exactly.
Well,
all right. Was it a tough book to write?
Yes. As a matter of fact, I was given an advance by Lippincott several years ago, and I couldn't get past page 1. I talked into tape recorders and had them transcribed. I'd written a play, which was done off Broadway, that brought Bobby De Niro and Diane Ladd and Sally Kirkland, Pete Masters, and a lot of people to prominence. And it was a pretty good play, and I got a great deal of encouragement from Clive Barnes. But the play was different. Even though people said it was autobiographical, the men were me too. Yeah. But really writing personally about yourself, I did this and I did that. Either you're dishonest and present an image of yourself as a virginal, sweet, nice, moral human being, or you tell the truth. And I chose to tell the truth. I think I'm pretty good. I have things wrong with me like every other human being, and I was in a very tough business. I'm still in a very tough business. But I chose to tell the truth. I accepted the premises and values of of the, I came into the glamorous Hollywood right at the end of that period, which was during the Second World War, toward the end of it. And those were the things that I had to accept if I was going to succeed in their, world then.
Yeah. All right. Surely, though, in writing an autobiography, you get to a particular place where you say, okay, the candid part is wonderful, but maybe I should skip over this little section here and not make it quite so candid. Is there that temptation?
Well, if you're talking about the sexual things in the book, which I suspect you are, I never am very explicit, but I haven't left anything out. I use the device of panning to, that they do in
it's
films,
marvelous, yes.
panning to a fireplace or a stormy sea or wind-tossed trees, which they used to do in films. Now they don't leave anything to your imagination, almost. Kate Millett told me that I unconsciously give all my husbands and lovers ratings and by my descriptions of what I'm panning to. I didn't think I did. But see, there was this kind of thing, and maybe it exists now too, that you were as glamorous and as desirable as who you could capture and who you went out with. And the Enquirer is one of the big newspapers of this country, and obviously if Julie Christie goes out with a dentist or a great television repairman, nobody's interested in it. It's only if she goes out with a celebrity. It still exists. And I accepted those premises, and that was what was desirable and turned me on, as the kids say, where I might have had a more interesting in terms of and solid life if I had got out with, as a matter of fact, Stanley Kramer liked me, and we had a couple of dates, but he was not a glamorous movie star. I might have had a more solid life and a home and children, but I didn't. And you can't go home again and change it.
Exactly. Many people have said that, who have subsequently written books, autobiographies, have said they're happy they did not keep diaries, because they invariably have found, from talking to other people who have kept diaries, that when you do keep those daily things, you tend to write down, for example, at the end of a certain day, you're very caught up by the emotions of what has happened to you. But if you can look at it in retrospect, you're often more honest with yourself.
Well, I think so. Like looking at your childhood, you look at it with an adult mind. I didn't keep a diary, but I kept appointment books because I'm so scattered that unless I write down what my appointments are, and from my appointments books, I save them, and checks, and my feelings about certain films. In the actual scripts themselves, I saved my scripts, and I've sent them all off to the American Academy of Dramatic Art. Not the American Academy, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. I had kept all those scripts, so I was able to recall. I don't know if I'll do as well with the last 25 years. My earlier years, I recall conversations word for word. And exact things. It's very strange. Maybe 25 years from now, please God, I'll recall these years. But it's strange. As I think about, say, the last 10 years, I mean, I can sing you the lyrics of a show I was in, say, 35 years ago, exact. And I did a picture, SOB, I just finished it, which means, what does it mean? Just a minute. Wait a minute. Standard operational bullshot, I'll say that's what it means, with Blake Edwards and a lot of stars. And I don't know what the dialogue was, but I can sing you a song from the first off-Broadway show I was in. Oh, it's better with a Union man, much better with a Union man. You'll live to regret if you ever forget this motto, proletarian. So always be upon your guard. Demand to see a union card, and so forth. And now, I don't even know why I know it, but I seem to have remembered that era of my life. Somebody said that getting there is much more fun than being there. I think it's true.
I guess, in many ways, writing an autobiography is like a sort of, almost like a psychoanalytic session, isn't it?
Jim, it is. much more so even. It's a catharsis. In fact, I was in analysis, and I still see my doctor once in a while when I have a problem. And she was amazed at some of the things that, when she read the book, she said, "You never told me about that." I mean, really traumatic things. And it's strange that I remembered them and wrote them down when hopefully millions of people are going to read them, and couldn't recall them to tell her. See, one thing leads to another as you write.
All right, once you found it easy to do this,
it wasn't easy.
All right, well, once you got into it,
Yeah.
What method did you use? Did you?
Well, I wrote at night as soon as it was dark. I couldn't write in the daytime, and I had a feather bed, a comforter, and I would sit in the house all by myself and write on yellow foolscap paper. Sometimes I would listen to music on the yellow legal pads, all the various incidents of that period and what happened and how I felt. And I would use a thing that we use in acting called effective memory. You remember the sensory impressions of that time, and then the thing comes back. If you were, like if I was in Venice, I would remember how cold it was and what the lights looked like and what my clothes felt like and how it smelled, and the emotionality and the incident came back exactly. You use that in acting as a parallel experience to what you have to experience in the play. And I would write sometimes till 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, till it was daylight. Then I would sleep till about noon, and my secretary would come over, and I would dictate from the yellow, because if I had to read the writing while it was fresh, because I have very bad penmanship. And I would dictate to her, and she would type as fast as I could talk on pink paper, with no grammar, with no spelling, with no punctuation, just to get it all down. Then we would sit, and I would go over it again that night, and then the next day she would type it clean. And I did every sort of sequence. You know, some chapters are a whole sequence, some are several. But I would do each sequence that way. Sometimes I would do it 3 or 4 times. And I wrote 1,250 pages. I can't believe it.
My word.
Well, I thought it shrank from manuscript to the book a third. Someone told me that. It only does about 10%. and when my editor was cutting it, and he let me do it. He came out to California 3 times. He didn't say, "Well, that's too much. Look at your contract. It says 380 to 420 words." And I call him Bloody Stumps Ambron, because I fought bitterly for nothing to come out. And I said, "After all, War and Peace is over 1,000 pages." He said, "Well, that's War and Peace." And there were stories about girls I knew which had nothing to do with me, like a whole chapter he took out, and things which are connected to the progress of my life in Hollywood. Like I wrote 3 chapters about my childhood in St. Louis, and he cut it to 1. He said, "Everybody has a childhood," and much the same.
Did you fight against him taking?
Oh, fight! We became bitter at him. I threw things at him, and I used to cook dinner for him, and he was sure I was poisoning him. But he didn't do it till it was all over. He said that I needed the catharsis of getting it all out, and one thing reminded me of something else. And then he was Paul Gallico's editor, and many other people, and he knew how to. Some stories he didn't take out; he just squeezed them, made them more concise.
What has been the reaction of some of the people you talk about in the book?
Well, strangely enough, Lee Strasberg, who was my teacher, liked it. Elsa Lanchester, who was Charles Lawton's wife, liked it. I studied with him. Some of the men I talk about, Burt Lancaster was one of them. When he was separated from his wife for a time, when I was a beginning actress at Universal, we had a romance, which we thought was going to end in marriage. And when he heard I was writing the book, he called me and was kidding me about it. And he told me some things I completely forgot, which were very funny. And I was so surprised. The only negative one I've had, the picture I just did, well, it wasn't really negative. Bill Holden and I did this film. And I have a funny story about Bill Holden, which is sort of like same time next year. They used to have big Christmas parties in Hollywood, and they don't anymore because people would spend all their money and not get home in time for the president's Christmas morning with the children, and I think a grip fell off the thing and got killed, and so now they're shut up tight at 4 o'clock. But the writers' building was always the funniest party, and each picture would have a party. And one Christmas, starting with The Great Gatsby, which I did when I was quite young, I suddenly went looking for ice with Bill Holden for the party, and next thing I knew it was 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. And I was trying to wake him up to go home with his because his kids, I think he had children, and I didn't tell him my name. Then the next Christmas, I was at Paramount doing A Place in the Sun. And then we did Executive Suite together, and we said, how do you do? It's very nice to meet you. And I called him Mr. Holden. He called me Miss Winters. This went on for about 6 years. In fact, one Christmas, I don't say so in the book, when I was married, I sent another girl who looked like me. And he did not know the difference. He was quite a wild young man in those days, but now he's rather staid. And when I met him at the first day of shooting, I said, hello, Mr. Holden. He said, Shelley, I think after your book you'd better call me Bill. But I think he's running for Senate or something.
You know, I was so happy, though, to see a sort of resurgence in his career after
Yes.
Network.
In fact, he reminded me of the whole thing when we were doing Merv Griffin's show, and he was teasing me. He said, oh, I love to play Father Christmas and Jingle Bells and stuff, because he always used to give me quite expensive, exotic presents. And then I think he was sort of angry, not angry, but a little annoyed that I'd put this in a book, because I think he's getting kidded about it a lot.
One of the
He's a wonderful actor.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, really.
What do you think about this recent picture? How is it going to turn out?
I haven't the foggiest notion of what it's about. There's Robert Preston and Julie Andrews. I think it's about the relationship of Blake Edwards and Julie Andrews. It's about a director, and Robert Milligan plays that. You know who was in Soap? He's very funny. It's a zany comedy. I play an agent, her agent, and it's a satire on Hollywood, I believe, but it's so crazy and so wild, and you know, somebody's studying a script and their Rolls Royce floats into the ocean, they keep studying it. And there's a couple of bananas, that's the only way I can describe parties, I give one. And one minute I'm telling Julie Andrews, be careful of her image, she's after all a lovely singing star, and the next minute, when her husband decides to buy back kind of a Walt Disney picture and sort of sexploitation it up, I'm telling her, after all, in today's market, that she should do a semi-nude dance. And there's no rational for the character. All I can say is I'm an agent who wanted to make money, and
It sounds like a marvelous role.
it is, and I think it's very funny. We as we worked, we had to keep from laughing all the time because you just hear it on the soundtrack.
Well, you know, people who only think Blake Edwards can do the Pink Panther films.
Well, he did 10, and
yeah.
oh,
And
I know
so many
him since he was a
marvelous-
Monogram cowboy. Yes, he came back from the army. I think he worked for Monogram. He was a cowboy, and I used to see him at Schwab's drugstore when I'd see Marilyn, whose name was Norma Jean. And he has great insight into human behavior, and I think this picture is very good. It's bananas. I mean, I don't know how to describe it. It's just there's a crazy Hollywood doctor who gives everybody shots for anything. That's Robert Preston, and there's Larry Hagman, who's the head of a studio, and there's Marissa Berenson, who 1 minute with a, what's his name, man from Uncle?
Vaughn?
No, the dark guy. Vaughn.
Robert Vaughn.
Robert Vaughn. She's his wife, and she's holding hands with a very handsome actor in back of her and someplace else. I mean, I don't know how the audience is going to know what to watch.
All right, now from what you've just described, how accurate a portrait of Hollywood is what you just talked about?
I think it's a little exaggerated, unless I'm not in that group. I may not be in that sort of jet set group. I would say up until I finished my 7-year contract and moved to New York, I sort of was in that kind of, I write about it sort of wild, funny, and I started working very young, 13 years old, and so I had a delayed adolescence and childhood, I think. I decided to have it when I was 20, and I had a few years of dashing around having fun. But when I moved to New York and began to study acting seriously, and I did a great many plays, people don't know it. I worked here at the Peachtree Playhouse. I did The Effect of Gamma Rays and Man in the Moon Marigolds. But I've done 100 plays in summer stock, and about 10 on Broadway. I did Cages by John Lewis Carlino with Jack Warden. I did Under the Weather, Sal Bellows plays, which I would like to tour. 3 one-act plays with Sal Bellows. I've done, I did Night of the Iguana, I've done Sweet Bird of Youth. I toured the country with that, and A Streetcar Named Desire in California. But I've done Two for the Seesaw and a great many plays. And when I started to get, sort of my career began to be films and plays, I didn't have as much time for dashing around.
Yeah. Do you find, though, when you're doing plays and then go into a film, you miss that rapport with the audience?
Yes, and I must say that one of the greatest instructions I ever got was from George Stevens. When I had been in a play and I was doing a film and I was performing for the balcony, which you have to be very careful, especially if you've done the role on the stage. And he said, Shelley, the difference between theater acting and film acting is, in film acting, you talk soft and think loud. That's the most apt description of film acting. I mean, everybody worries about the set and the matching and everything. And if it isn't in the actor's eyes, the audience starts, in fact, in American Tragedy, A Place in the Sun, I have a scene with Monty Clift where I didn't understand about matching those days, where I have black shoes on, and my feet hurt, and I put a more comfortable pair on, and when I turn around a corner, I've got brown and white shoes on. Well, they said, when are we going to shoot the scene over again? He said, we're not. If they're looking at her shoes, I can go home.
We've lost the scene in your
And they've never, not one person ever noticed it. No. And they're brown and white shoes. And it's a full shot and we're walking. And no one noticed it. They were so involved in the scene.
I've seen the movie.
And you never noticed
10 times, yeah.
I mean, there's a theater in Venice that plays it every August. It's called
amazing.
Un Posto nel Sol.
Yeah. You once said that one of the greatest things an actor or an actress can do for an audience is to communicate ideas.
Well, I think that's the purpose of acting. I think you are kind of a, for want of a better word, a telegraph between the playwright or scriptwriter and director and the audience. That's why I think an actor has to keep going back to a live audience. Because an audience does many things besides laugh and cry. They're very silent sometimes, or they, if they're bored, they shift around. When I was doing Hatful of Rain, there was a certain sound at the exact same place in the second act, at the beginning of the second act. And I thought some stupid usher was opening, it was so loud that you know that they have these fire doors that you push a thing down and to go outside. And I bitterly complained to the stage manager. I said, there's somebody going out on that exact word every night. They're opening a door. And he said, well, tonight's performance I'll go out and see. And he came back to my dressing room and he looked at me. He said, when you stop hearing that noise, you start worrying. And I said, why? He said, that's the moment that Ben Gazzara puts his hand on your stomach to hear, a baby. The first signs of life, it kind of flutters. That's the first time you feel life. And he puts his hand on my stomach, that's the scene. And then instead of saying, oh my God, he goes, ooh, like that. And I look at him and he's a junkie and I'm appalled, that's his reaction. And that sound was every woman in the audience opening their bags. In 1955, they had, or 6 when I did, these kind of clip bags. And that was 1,500 women opening their bags to get their Kleenex. And at the exact moment, they all did it.
That is amazing.
And that was the noise. And if I didn't hear it, I knew something was wrong with the scene. Yeah. Shirley Booth once told me that an audience takes on the character of the personality of one person. And like you'll get some audiences that will laugh at everything, even when they're not supposed to. They're rather hysterical. You have to give an audience, especially in a serious play, the relief of laughter, because they can't take all the trauma of the emotion.
Why should an audience differ, though, from night to night?
I don't know. They do, though. Sometimes it's an audience who wants to see the serious and intellectual sides of a play. Oh, I've talked to many actors about this. Sometimes it's an audience who is shifty and it's raining outside and they're uncomfortable, but they take on one personality, 2,000 people. It's very odd, I know, but it's true.
There is the thought, somebody once told me that there is no such thing as a bad audience,
but only a bad performance. But I don't know if I agree with that.
Well,
there is
what they may mean is an actor must stay concentrated, and speech is a result of thought. That's why I can never use teleprompters. I can't read and talk at the same time. I have to think about it and then talk. An actor must stay concentrated and using the emotional memory from scene to scene to scene. And if an audience is shifty and you stay concentrated, you can just feel the second when you grab them, and it's a great victory. Mm-hmm. It's a great victory when you've got it. It happens in movies too.
Are you as aware of it when it happens?
Well, you can't change it. It's,
right.
There it is. And one of my favorite jokes is to go to see a picture I'm in and then see it another time and come home and say, that performance was much better. But it was a better audience. Maybe they weren't eating as much popcorn that night.
We are out of time for this week. Can you come back next time?
Yes.
I'd love for it. The book is called Shelley, also known as Shirley, and we'll look forward to our next talk.
Just show it up so they know what to look for in the story.
This is the book. Can you see it? Okay. See you next time. Thank you all for watching.
Thank you, Jim.
Good night.
Good night.